The following program is video supplemental instruction. VSI is brought to you by the Teaching Center, UF's Learning Support Center, www.teachingcenter.ufl.edu.
Welcome. This is the clue symbolizing practice. In this lesson, we're going to go over how to convert the clues or the rules that you're given on your on the LSAT logic games, and how to convert them to symbols that are easier to access and more convenient for you to use throughout your game. Remember that your clues are always going to be written in a full sentence form. The LSAT gives it to you in a full sentence form, and it's all the way up the top by the premise. It's all mushed together, sort of, and to have to go back to that and read the whole sentence every time you want to check a rule and check a clue or go back to it can actually cost you a little bit more time. So even though you're rewriting the rules, you might ask yourself, doesn't that cost me time? I mean, it might cost you a little bit of time, but usually you're rewriting them in very simple symbols, so they don't take that much time to write. And the time that you're going to save yourself is going to make up for the time that you spend, because again, the clues are going to be really simple. They're small and they're easier to access. So right under this video, the PDF is available that has this worksheet available as a PDF. So if you want to print it out, if you want to read along as we go through it, if you want to try and do it yourself before and then check your answers, that's fine. So I won't be writing down the questions. I'll assume that you have it. So the first question reads, C arrives before E. This one's pretty simple. The way you would write this is C before E. Now, it's important that you use the ellipsis, because what the ellipsis indicates is that C comes before E, but you don't know where. You don't know if C's first and E is last, or if C's second and E is third. It could be either or. The important thing is not to put C right before E, because if you assume that C has to come immediately before E, then you're assuming something that the premise or clue isn't necessarily implying. So it's important to put down the information that you're given, but not to put down more information than what you're given, because you might make that mistake and assume something that you're not really being told. So question 2 reads, L arrives the day after P. So that's how you would write this one. L arrives the day after P. And this one, the clue is telling you exactly where these two are in position in regards to each other. It's telling you that L comes right after P. So you block it like this so that you know that wherever P is, L is going to be right after that. 3 reads, James arrives before both Kyle and Mary. So there's 2 ways you can do this one. You can either do it like this. James arrives before Kyle. James arrives before Mary. Or you can do it like this. Now, the reason, again, that you wouldn't say go like this is because you don't know what the relationship between Kyle and Mary is. You can have Mary in front of Kyle, you can have Kyle in front of Mary, but you don't know. You can't assume that you know. So if you write it like this, you might make that mistake. You might look back at the clue and think to yourself that you know where these two are in relation to each other, but you don't. All it's saying is that James arrives at some point before Kyle and Mary. So these 2 symbols express that. This one, I mean, it also expresses that, but it might get you in trouble. You want to make it as easy on you as possible so that when you look back while you're doing the the games, that you don't get confused. The games are really tense, and they can get really complex. You know, they're asking you such obscure things, and you're working the diagram, and you've gone over 3 or 4 different setups, and by the time you get back to your clue, you've thought yourself into 30 different knots that you want it to be as simple as possible so that you know exactly what it means, and you don't have to think back and make sure that you're not thinking something that it's not. So the 4th one reads, Taylor cannot be appointed to any time slot that is immediately after the time slot to which Gabe is appointed. So again, there's 2 ways you could do this. So it's basically telling you that Taylor can't come right after Gabe. That's what it's telling you. So we could do this block, and we can say that Taylor cannot be right after Gabe, or we could put the tilde on the outside and say that Taylor can't come right after Gabe. Either one of these expresses the same thing. The important thing is to know that that Taylor can't come right after Gabe. So if you have that position anywhere on your diagram, you know it's going to be incorrect. You can't have that on your diagram. And 5 reads, there must be exactly 2 people scheduled between Larry and Frank. So with this one, the way I would do it is like this. This arrow, double-sided arrow, is very important because all the question is, the clue is telling you is that there has to be 2 people between Larry and Frank, but it's not telling you where Larry and Frank are. You don't know if Frank's at the front at the beginning and Larry's at the end, or if Larry's at the beginning and Frank is at the end. So you have to make sure that you give yourself a reminder that it doesn't have to be this way, because if you were to write this out without this arrow and you look back at the clue, again, you're going to start, after doing several questions, you're going to come back and you're just going to assume that Larry's in front of Frank, and that can throw your whole game off depending on the questions. So you have to make sure that you remember that this doesn't have to be this way. Now if it says Larry comes before Frank and there has to be at least 2 people between them, then you wouldn't write this arrow, and it would just be Larry before Frank with 2 people. But since it doesn't give you that, then that's how you would have to write it. And this includes the clue symbolizing practice lesson. If you have any questions, you can email us at LSAT180UF@gmail.com. That's LSAT180UF@gmail.com.
The Teaching Center, UF's Learning Support Center, www.teachingcenter.ufl.edu.